So Tina and Seth, you both have announcements.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to let people know about the launch of the Polluters Pay campaign. Senator Eldridge and Rep. Owens on Friday, this Friday, St. Patrick's Day, 3/17, 9:30 in the morning at the Commander's Mansion at 440 Talcott Avenue in Watertown. I put it in the chat and I'll put it again in the chat. Again, the launch of the Polluters Pay campaign for the bill. Steph.
And very quickly, we have started a series of webinars this year. I think some of you have probably attended them. It's basically called What Can I Do? And it's about how to take advantage of the different subsidies and rebates and tax credits that are available for individuals who are trying to do the right thing and reduce their carbon footprint. The next one is going to be on April 6th. They're all at 7 o'clock, and the topic will be rooftop solar. And we're looking forward to a great presentation. If you're considering it, if you've done it already and want to contribute to the conversation, or if you're just wanting to learn about it, it's a great opportunity. And I'm going to put the information for how to register in the chat as well. Hope to see you then, April 6th at 7 o'clock. It's first Thursday of every month.
All right, are we ready to move into our meeting now? I have the pleasure of introducing Eileen Ryan, who has already been talking to us. She's that kind of passionate person who can't stop talking about the plastics problem. When I get on the phone with her, we just get right into it, and she's going to share the amazing amount that she has learned about the plastics problem through her longtime activism. She was active in getting the single-use plastic shopping bags banned in Watertown. Going back to 2016, she got involved in Beyond Plastics, which is headed by Judith Enck. I believe Judith was a former head of the EPA. Is that right? Yes. And Eileen is so active that, I mean, I get email from her all the time. And even today, she sent out an email which pointed me to the episode of Democracy Now! This morning that was about the derailment of the train that spewed all those plastics in East Palestine, Ohio. And I loved it in that talk that they kept talking about the Norfolk Southern Railroad. I mean, is that the way people here say Norfolk? I mean, everybody there was saying Norfolk. I thought, okay, that works to say it that way there. But anyway, she is so on top of the news about plastics, and I will shut up and let her go on with it then. Oh, but just after her, I think we're going to have Roger Luckman also maybe add a bit about the legislation that is in the works on plastics. Eileen's going to cover that too, but our legislative committee's been taking a look at that too. So we will sync those together at the end, I think. All right.
That's great. So how do you want people to check questions? Should we just have people put them in the chat as we're going along and somebody can moderate that, or?
Hi, Eileen. Hi, we've met before. I'm going to facilitate the questions. So it's up to you if you would like to speak for a while first, and then we could do a Q&A.
Oh yeah, I'm going to do a full presentation, so I won't take any questions during the full presentation, which will be about 30 minutes long. So
Perfect.
I'll just dive right in. Okay, let me share my screen here. Oops, what happened here? Stop share. Wait a minute. Try again. Why isn't this working? Let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm really excited to join you. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to Elders Climate Action today. I got involved with Beyond Plastics in 2021 after I saw the incredible movie, which is called The Story of Plastic, and I went to a talk by Judith Enck. So Judith Enck is the founder of Beyond Plastics, which is located at Bennington College. And we now have, I think it's over 70 different affiliate groups and small groups that are affiliated with Beyond Plastics. And I started one in Boston, which is called Beyond Plastics Greater Boston. Okay, so in addition to being a climate activist, I also work on a lot of social justice issues, but one of the most important ways I think of affecting change, and the plastic pollution crisis needs a lot of change, is through legislative action, which I know all of you support. So here I am with Senator Edward Markey. This was in June of 2019, before his re-election campaign. It was actually before Kennedy decided to run as well. But plastic pollution is an environmental justice issue and a public health and ecological crisis. Whether you're just becoming aware of the plastic pollution crisis or you're a long-term anti-plastic activist, I hope you will learn something new about plastic pollution today. So we don't have decades to turn the tide on plastic pollution. We all need to join the work that has already begun to end the plastic pollution crisis. Beyond Plastic likes to focus on upstream solutions to the crisis. And one of the best ways to do that is through legislation, as I was just saying. So before Markey was my senator, he was also my my US representative. And I've always been really impressed with his attention to climate activism and climate issues. And actually just yesterday on that Democracy Now! Segment with Amy Goodman that was just mentioned, he is there grilling, I think he's the head of Norfolk Southern, about the train disaster, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. So during my adult life, I've tried to avoid purchasing single-use plastics and plastic packaging as much as I could, but this has become an increasingly difficult task, which I'll explain why a little bit later, especially why we're seeing so much more plastic. But I eventually realized that my power as a citizen was stronger than my power as an individual consumer. After seeing the film Bag It, I decided to help write and pass the single-use plastic shopping bag ban where I live in Watertown. And after a few years of meetings with our committee, which my daughter called the Bag Ladies because we were all women, Watertown passed the single-use plastic shopping bag in 2016. It went into effect in 2017. And through this work, I got to know all of my city councilors and gained a better understanding of how our city government works. I also had fun and made great friends. So this is part of the brochure that Leslie Evans designed and I wrote to introduce the bag ban to Watertown. I also believe that one of the best ways to create change is through collective action. And the first Earth Day occurred in 1970 and led to the foundation of the Environmental Protection Agency. Here's another more recent demonstration of collective action. This is one of the school strikes for climate. This is in September of 2019, but there was also just one on the first Friday of March, which I participated in as well. And there were over 200 students there, and it got very little coverage. There was almost no coverage in the Boston Globe, which I find very disturbing. But anyway, young people will live longer with the devastating consequences and effects of climate change. And if you don't believe that you can make a difference, just look at Greta Thunberg, who has become, she's the amazing young Swedish activist who started the school strikes for climate and is now an internationally recognized leader on climate change. And she has a new book out now. So what does plastic have to do with climate change? The answer is a lot. As you can see in this slide, if plastic pollution and production was a country, it would be the 5th largest contributor to climate change. Think about that. Plastics contribute more to climate emissions than all of Europe or South America or Australia. Plastics contribute to CO2 emissions from the time the fossil fuels and chemicals are extracted to make plastics to the time they are incinerated or break down into microplastics. Beyond Plastics published a well-researched report in 2021 entitled Plastics Are the New Coal. I highly recommend reading it if you have the time. It can be found on the Beyond Plastics website. So the next 3 slides are going to show the devastating and disastrous effects of climate change. And we're only going to get more hurricanes and snowstorms like we're getting today, floods, and fires. As Judith Enck, the founder of Beyond Plastics, likes to say, some people claim to be climate change deniers, but she's never met a plastic pollution denier. You can find plastic pollution everywhere you look. So why are we seeing so much more plastic everywhere? Because plastics are the petrochemicals plan B. As buildings and transportation become more energy efficient, the plastic industry is turning to plastics as a way to keep the fossil fuel industry in business. In the past, 15 years or so, the amount of plastic produced has grown exponentially and is projected to drastically increase unless we stop the plastic industry from forcing so much plastic on us. 50% of all plastics ever produced have been produced in the past 16 years or so. Considering that modern plastics have only been around for about 70 years, this is shocking. This also shows we don't need all of this plastic. 40% of plastic used today is not actually used by people, it's just packaging. No one is asking for more single-use plastic packaging or single-use plastics in general. A recent nonpartisan study by Oceana found that 86% of Americans are concerned about single-use plastics. So plastics are made from fossil fuels and chemicals. Chemicals are added to plastics to make them pliable or rigid, to add color, and for a variety of other reasons. Many of the chemicals used in plastics are toxic. Some of these chemicals are known carcinogens and are linked to a variety of health issues, which I'll address later. Most plastics are now made from ethane, which is a byproduct of fracked gas. Fracking is a relatively new method of extracting gas from bedrock shale. Fracking destroys natural landscapes, pollutes groundwater, sometimes causing it to become radioactive, and causes unnatural earthquakes. So the plants you see, the factories that you see in the background here, are fracked gas plants under construction. Fracked gas is being produced in the environmental justice neighborhoods of Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. At least 42 plastic facilities have opened since 2018 or 2019 and are under construction or in the permitting process. In 2002, the US plastic industry released as much greenhouse gas emissions as 116 coal-fired power plants. Plastic is on track to outpace coal's greenhouse gas emissions in the US by 2030. The fracked gas produced in the US is poisoning the groundwater, the air, the land, and the surrounding environment. It is not being used to heat homes. It is being piped and shipped abroad to make more plastics. There are no fracked gas plants in the northeastern United States. New York passed a ban on fracking, and New England doesn't have the geological structure needed for fracking. However, gas pipelines are running underground in the Northeast and transporting fracked gas to seaports and leaking methane along the way. So plastic production and pollution is a major environmental justice issue. This is Sharon Levine. She's an amazing activist from St. James Parish in Louisiana. She's a retired special education teacher who is dedicated to trying to hold the petrochemical manufacturing industry accountable for the environmental and human health degradation of her neighborhood. She actually won a lawsuit last year against Formosa Plastics, so they have been put on hold temporarily in her neighborhood. Sharon lives in an area of Louisiana which is referred to as Cancer Alley because so many residents have been diagnosed or died of cancer. Beside Sharon are photos of the petrochemical plants that line the Mississippi River near her home. Sharon and many of her neighbors are the direct descendants of people who were once enslaved by wealthy sugar cane plantation owners. Many of the white people who still lived in this neighborhood when the petrochemical companies came in were paid for their homes, but no such luck for folks like Sharon. The petrochemical industry has not only polluted the air and the water in this area, it has also destroyed the soil so that no one can even grow vegetables there anymore. The people who are most affected by the harmful health effects of plastic pollution are those who live within 3 miles of these petrochemical clusters and are 67% more likely to be people of color and earn 27% less than average. But don't think for a minute that just because you don't live in Cancer Alley or the Ohio River Valley where frack gas is being extracted, that environmental injustice isn't happening in your own backyard. It is. The health and environmental issues related to plastic pollution are happening everywhere. Until recently, Springfield, Massachusetts was the asthma capital of the country due to poor air quality from the burning of biomass and fossil fuels, as well as waste incineration. I was at a hearing for the Massachusetts expanded bottle bill in 2021, and as I was waiting to speak, I heard the heartbreaking testimonies of people who have lost family members and neighbors to cancer caused by the pollutants from an incinerator in an environmental justice community north of Boston, which was in Saugus. We need to address the systemic issues that cause environmental pollution and death. So here we see the fossil fuel industry's Plan B in action: excessive and unnecessary plastic packaging. Plastic is an insidious material and is causing human and wildlife health issues. The chemicals in plastics and microplastics are entering our bodies in ways we cannot see and are not aware of. So how did we get to this point? I just want to also add here that plastic is not an inert material. So it is leaching chemicals into the food that we eat when we buy it in plastic packaging. Okay, so I grew up with the expression waste not, want not, and others of you may have heard the expression use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Americans had to be taught to use single-use plastics and to become part of the throwaway society in the 1950s and 1960s. At that time period, the plastic industry led an advertising campaign to convince Americans that single-use plastics were a good idea. We are now suffering the consequences of unbridled consumerism and a throwaway culture. So the majority of plastic waste is put into landfills. About 12% of it is incinerated, but too much of it ends up in the ocean and other waterways every year. The amount of plastic that enters the ocean daily is the equivalent of dumping 1 garbage truck of plastic waste into the ocean every minute. At the rate that plastics are being produced and plastic waste is ending up in our waterways, by 2025, for every 3 pounds of fish in the ocean, there will be 1 pound of plastic. Fish and other marine animals cannot survive with this much plastic in their environments. This is an albatross, a majestic seabird whose belly has been opened up to show that it died from consuming mostly single-use plastic trash. Marine animals and birds are confusing bits of plastic with real food. I read recently that it's not only that some plastic items look like fish, bird food, or look like fish, but they also smell like what the animals like to eat. But it's just not just marine animals that are dying from consuming plastic. Even elephants in Sri Lanka are dying from eating plastic at dump sites. And we are consuming plastic accidentally. The average person consumes about a credit card's worth of plastic every week. Most of this plastic is in the form of microplastics or nanoplastics, plastics we can't even see. A study a couple years ago found that microplastics are even in sea spray. They are in the air we breathe. They are in the water we drink. Microplastics and microfibers are everywhere. So microfibers are even in snowflakes. This photograph is of a snowflake containing a microfiber. Microfibers come from synthetic clothing, carpeting, upholstery, and camping equipment made from synthetic materials. Plastic can now be found even in the most remote areas of the world. Here are microplastics in Arctic sea ice. Some people now joke that we are now living not in the geological era of the Anthropocene, but in the Plasticine era. So one of the reasons microfibers are everywhere is because of fast fashion. In the 1990s, the synthetic clothing market started to expand, and cheap clothing for multiple reasons, including exploitative working conditions, took off. Suddenly, clothing became disposable and plastic. It's hard today to buy clothing made completely of natural fibers. According to the EPA in 2017, clothing accounted for up to 6.3% of all municipal solid waste. 11 million tons of clothing was landfilled, 32 million tons were incinerated, and just 2.6 million tons were recycled. And as you can see in this photograph, a lot of it ended up in the Atacama Desert in Chile. So it's being dumped into these remote areas around the world. So what is all this exposure to plastics doing to us? As I briefly mentioned earlier, plastics contain many different toxic chemicals to make them pliable or rigid, and so they can be easily shaped. These chemicals are accumulating in our bodies and are linked to cancers, reproductive problems, metabolic disorders, autoimmune diseases, malnutrition, and other health issues. Endocrine disrupting chemicals called phthalates are linked to neurodevelopment, behavioral, hormonal, and metabolic problems. I learned from Mount Sinai public health expert Sarah Evans that in the past 20 years, our lifetime risk has doubled or even tripled for the following diseases: Alzheimer's, asthma, autism, cancer, cardiovascular disease, food allergies, developmental disabilities, diabetes, infertility, and obesity. Okay, so this is an image of the train wreck, the Norfolk Southern train wreck that happened on February 3rd in East Palestine, Ohio. This train was 2 miles long and was carrying many toxic chemicals that are used to manufacture plastics, including polyethylene and vinyl chloride. Vinyl chloride is used to make polyvinyl chloride, which is in PVC piping, shower curtains, and many children's toys, including the bathtub favorite, the rubber ducky. As Judith Enck said yesterday in that Democracy Now! Episode, it's time to ditch the ducky. Beyond Plastics has a petition that you can sign and send to the EPA calling for a ban on vinyl chloride. There is no need to transport toxic chemicals through environmental justice neighborhoods just to make things that are easily manufactured using sustainable materials. All right, so this is an illustration of how microplastics and are going through the membrane of placentas into infants as they're being developed in the fetus. So there's a doctor in Italy who discovered this several years ago, but now plastics are being found in human blood and in lung tissue. So it's a very, very concerning. So do you want to reduce your exposure to microplastics? Don't drink water from plastic bottles. That goes for not just the single-use plastic water bottles, but any kind of bottle made out of plastic you want to avoid. So plastic water bottles are a ubiquitous problem. And I was on a call with the Italian doctor who discovered that there were microplastics in fetal tissue. And he said if there's one thing we can do to reduce plastic pollution, it is to ban single-use plastic water bottles. So we all need to support the expanded water bill in Massachusetts. So another way, so we were talking about this a little bit at the beginning, another way that young people especially are being exposed to plastics, microplastics, and the chemicals related to plastics is through artificial turf. Synthetic turf, also known as astroturf, is deceptively sometimes just referred to as turf by the artificial turf industry, is a toxic mixture of crumb rubber, sometimes made with used tires or old synthetic athletic shoes, and chemical-laden plastic grass. Artificial turf breaks down into microplastics while athletes are playing on it, and these plastics are ingested by our young athletes. Artificial turf contains PFAS. You cannot make it without PFAS. Don't let anybody try to convince you otherwise. PFAS are the family of forever chemicals that are now contaminating our groundwater and drinking supplies. So the heavy metals that are found in artificial turf are usually in the crumb rubber. So they are the ones that are made from the recycled tires. So lead and cadmium have been found in the crumb rubber. Now there is a new movement to put crumb rubber that's made out of more organic materials, but it still has PFAS on it. Synthetic fields also create heat islands where the fields can become much hotter than than asphalt in the sun, that can be more than 70 degrees hotter than natural grass. Plastic turf fields only last for 8 to 10 years before they have to be replaced. And guess what? There's nowhere to put them safely. Rolls of plastic turf are showing up in illegal and unsafe locations all over the world. They cannot be recycled. Sometimes they are now being ground up to make shock pads to go underneath the grass, but they become more toxic. Anytime you're recycling plastics, they actually, most of the time, become more toxic, especially if they have PFAS in them. All right, so there is no way to recycle our way out of the plastic pollution problem. Recycling is a false solution to the plastic problem, and it always has been. When the US government started to tackle the problem of plastic waste in the 1960s by proposing regulations, the petrochemical plastic industry pushed back and started campaigns like the Make America Beautiful campaign to put the onus of plastic waste back on the individual. The industry still insists that the issue with plastic pollution is not that too much plastic is produced, but that people are littering and not disposing of plastics properly. So let's be clear, only about 8.5% of all plastic ever produced has been recycled, and most of it has been downcycled. And just recently, Judith Enck and Jan Dell did a whole project researching how much plastic gets recycled in the US, and they found that in 2021, it was under 6% of plastic was getting recycled. Unlike glass or metal, which are infinitely recyclable into the same product, plastic has to be is usually downcycled into an inferior project. So it's not like a glass bottle that can be infinitely turned back into a glass bottle. The plastic industry also uses those chasing arrow recycling symbols on the bottom of products to make people believe that they will be recycled. But only number 1 and number 2 plastic items, and sometimes number 5, can be properly recycled. All other plastics should be put in the trash. Plastic films and plastic bags should never, ever be added to your recycling bin. They gum up the works at recycling facilities and are very toxic to melt down. So stop wish cycling. It just contaminates the recycling supply. So what do we need to do? We need to stop making so much plastic as much as possible. It's destroying our health, the environment, and the world. We need to advocate for reusable, refillable solutions to the single-use plastic problem and demand products designed to stay out of landfills and incinerators. Don't be fooled by the greenwashers who are trying to make you think that bioplastics or waste-to-energy solutions are a good idea. If your bathtub is overflowing, what do? You turn off the tap. You do not try to remove spoonfuls of water while the water is still filling the tub. This is an illustration from the Story of Stuff, actually. So just say no to plastic. Try to avoid single-use plastics and fast fashion in your own life and help make legislative change. The plastic industry, which is also the fossil fuel and petrochemical industry, is never going to regulate itself. I repeat, the petrochemical industry is never going to regulate itself. So these are some collages I made with plastic trash I found on the streets of Watertown. My children immediately told me where each of the plastic straws came from. In case you are unaware, the green ones are from Starbucks. I think McDonald's is the white and red and yellow striped ones. And there's also Dunkin' Donuts ones in there and a variety of other ones. So what else can we do? Of course, I know that all of you are advocates of legislative change. So meet with your representatives, show up at your town or city hall, at the State House or in Washington, D.C. Luckily, now you don't even have to travel. You can meet with your elected representatives virtually. Elected officials, as you probably already know, are often enjoy meeting with their constituents. They want to know what we care about. These are young climate activists from the Sunrise Movement at the Massachusetts State House in December of 2019. And I love this quotation by Rebecca Solnit. More than personal virtue, we need collective action at every scale. The revolution won't happen by people staying home and being good. Individual choices will not provide the sea change we need to see now. We all need to come together to do more and advocate for systemic change. So support legislation that reduces plastic pollution, supports renewable energy and the climate legislative agenda. Plastic pollution is a problem everyone can see, and in a recent poll, 81% of Americans supported national, state, and local legislation to reduce single-use plastics. I assume most of you know who your elected officials are, but if you don't, you can use this website. It works really well. You can also write letters to the editor of your local newspaper, and I'm pleased to say I've had 2 published by the Boston Globe that relate to plastic pollution. You can also help with one of the campaigns that Beyond Plastics is working on. So one of them is to try to get Meals on Wheels, the delivery service for food to the elderly, to replace the single-use, at least where my mother lives, it's black plastic, to reusable containers. They also have a campaign right now to get restaurants to return to reusables. And there is funding available for restaurants in Massachusetts to purchase reusable dishes and dishwashers. Another campaign they're working on is to get dry cleaners to stop using those thin film plastic bags. So if you can go to the Beyond Plastics website and learn more about those campaigns. So these are Matryoshka dolls because I like this idea of moving out, right? That we can keep affecting change on a wider scale. We start with ourselves, and we educate ourselves, and then we educate others, and then we try to implement change in our communities, in our faith communities, in our towns where we live, in our states, and then we go for the national level, right? So if you work at a hospital, school, university, or government, you have an affiliation with one of them, try to affect change there and educate people about plastics. Ask stores where you shop, restaurants where you eat to reduce the amount of plastic they use. Write to the multinational corporations who are contributing the most to the plastic pollution problem. Well, who are those global plastic polluters? Here they are. These are the 10 worst companies. 10 biggest polluters in the world. The plastic trash from these 10 multinational companies is found all over the world. And how do we know this? Partly from brand audits conducted by citizens around the world. Brand audits occur when communities come together and collect litter and waste they find on beaches or local waterways and sort the waste based on brand. Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nestle, Unilever, and Procter & Gamble led the way. And they led the way in 2021, and I think they led the way again in 2022. So these brand audits are done by Break Free from Plastic. They coordinate all this information that they gather from over 45 countries around the world. And well, I don't have the statistics for 2022 right now, but the statistics for 2021 where they did over 440 brand audits. So they just completed 5 years of brand audits, which supposedly is going to be very useful information for going forth and making change and putting pressure on these multinational campaigns. But you can also join a campaign to ask one of these companies to reduce their plastic packaging. And there is a group called Trash Mobs. It's called FOCO Trash Mobs. It's located in Fort Collins, Colorado, and they have targeted some of these companies. They've also they organize return to sender campaigns where you take a piece of plastic packaging and you send it back to the headquarters. So they've done ones with Frito-Lay, Hershey's. They've just finished a campaign with Starbucks, trying to get Starbucks to encourage people to bring back their reusable containers. It's working. And now they're also done with Beyond Plastics. We did a big plastic trash take back to a variety of grocery stores, but we especially targeted Trader Joe's and Whole Foods last summer. And now the FOCO Trash Mobs is going to be doing something targeting Bob's Red Mill, which sells a lot of like organic, natural flowers, but they're all packaged in plastic at this point. All right. So what can you do soon and really locally? You can come to this postcard writing and networking event that I've organized with Beyond Plastics Greater Boston. It's going to be held on Saturday, the 25th from 3:30 to 5:30 at First Parish Watertown. I hope you will join us. We will be writing postcards in support of legislation to reduce plastic pollution in Massachusetts. And it will be, I hope, a fun networking time when people can meet other people working on plastic reduction and toxin reduction issues. So this is a list of some of the the bills that we will be supporting Beyond Plastics Greater Boston. And I'm also part of a group called the Massachusetts Zero Waste Advocates. So it's a coalition of different groups in Massachusetts. So we're going to be supporting these. The group is led by Kirsty Pecci, who used to be at Environmental Law, Conservation Law Foundation. Now she started her own group called Just Zero. So we want the Better Bottle Bill, also known as the Expanded Bottle Bill. We want an EPR for packaging. EPR stands for Extended Producer Responsibility. So we're going to specifically target plastic packaging. Chemical recycling. Chemical recycling is just a euphemism for incineration. We want to put a moratorium on chemical recycling. It's very toxic in Massachusetts. And I heard from Kirsty Pecci recently that a company just purchased, I think, 24 acres in Templeton, Massachusetts, that is planning to put, it's also called something called waste to energy or pyrolysis plant there. So we want to put a moratorium on that. And then there's, right now there's an omnibus plastics, single-use plastic bill in front of the legislature, which covers single-use plastic bags, black plastic, polystyrene, balloon releases, hotel toiletries, plastic cutlery, straws only upon request. And there might even be more than that, but that would be wonderful if we could get that done. And then I personally really want to support, and there are other people there are a lot of other people in Massachusetts who want a ban on artificial turf and a PFAS ban. But actually the EPA, just this morning, there's an article in the New York Times saying the EPA is going to start banning certain PFAS chemicals and requiring communities or providing money, I think, to help clean up water supplies. Anyway, the other thing you can do is you can join my group. So my group is Beyond Plastics Greater Boston. It's a local group of Beyond Plastics. And we have members from all over Eastern Massachusetts. You don't have to live that close into Boston. We actually have somebody from Agawam that's been joining us, Ipswich, Marblehead, somebody who's in Providence, Rhode Island, but she works a lot in New Bedford and South Dartmouth. So, and then everybody closer into the city. So this is a picture of Judith Enck. This is at an action she was at before the pandemic. And I feel like, if you want to make change, you got to show up, right? Stand up, show out, speak out about what you care about. The other thing is Judith is going to be offering a plastic pollution course coming up. The next session starts on April 19th. If you're interested in taking her course, I highly recommend it. It's 7 Wednesdays. It costs $100. It's all on Zoom. So you register for it at Kappa at Bennington College. Kappa, that we're going to show that on another slide. It's the courses they offer through this Kappa program are really cool. So anyway, another thing you can do to educate yourself is you can watch some of these movies. The Story of Plastic I mentioned earlier is an excellent film. There's going to be a screening of it in person in Newburyport on April 20th, but sometimes it can be hard to find online, but give it a try. Microplastics Madness is a charming, and some people think the only uplifting movie there is about plastic pollution, but that is put forward by Cafeteria Culture. And it's about 2 5th grade classrooms in Red Hook, New York, that go out and learn about microplastics and plastic pollution in general. And they end up these 10-year-olds end up going to City Hall in downtown Manhattan, and they help to pass the polystyrene ban that went into effect in New York State, I think in 2021. The movie was made before the pandemic, so I think they were speaking out in 2019. And then Why Plastic is a series of 3 movies. One is called Coca-Cola's Plastic Promises, which talks about, Coca-Cola, the #1 plastic polluter, and how they keep promising that they are going to reduce their plastic, so we call it the plastic footprint, and they don't really follow through. But they were offering refillable glass bottles in Samoa until 2021. They can go back to offering refillables everywhere. The other one is called The Myth of Recycling, and the third film is called We the Guinea Pigs, which I highly recommend all 3 of them. But We the Guinea Pigs is a very unsettling film about the health hazards of plastics and how they are all in our bodies, and it especially focuses on breast cancer, infertility, learning disorders, and some gender issues that are being affected by plastics and the chemicals in plastics. So these are some websites: beyondplastics.org, Cafeteria Culture, Break Free from Plastic. That's the group that does the brand audits. They're an international group. And Plastic Pollution Coalition, which has great webinars. They're based in California. This book, Thicker Than Water, I recommend. It's a pretty easy read. The subtitle has something to do with reducing plastic pollution. Can't remember what it is right now. But there's also a book by Shauna Swan called Countdown that specifically addresses the infertility rates that have been caused by plastic pollution. So this is a QR code for Beyond Plastics. You don't need to take out your phones right now, but this is if you wanted to make a donation to Beyond Plastics. They are doing really good work. They have new staff members. They're growing quite a bit, which is great. And then this is a little bit, this shows you where Bennington is. Actually, the funniest thing is I grew up on the campus of Bennington College, and then I ended up taking that course there. And it was so funny. Jude often has the background of places where I played when I was a child. And that's it. So we only have one Earth. We need to do everything we can, as you know, to take care of it. This is a banner I made for Earth Day in 2021. I was at a big action in front of the State House, but I took this picture before anybody else was standing on the steps. So it looks like I was, there alone. And that's it. So thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer questions now.
Thank you so much, Eileen. That was so much information. So the way we usually do this is you can raise your hand with the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen. We have one question in the stack, but there also was one question that you referred in the chat to an expanded water bill. What is that expanded water bill? Can you just say what that is?
Yes. So the expanded bottle bill, it's not just about water bottles, but it will cover. So we have a bottle bill in Massachusetts, but it went into effect around 1980. It has a 5-cent deposit return on it, and it only covers carbonated beverages. So the expanded bottle bill, or the better bottle bill, it's being called by both names now, would cover all bottles, from the tiniest, single-use nip bottles that are used for alcohol, all the way up to 3-liter wine bottles. It will not cover formula and milk, but everything else. It will help municipalities reduce their recycling costs drastically. And bottle bills are the best way to recycle glass, metal, and plastic. Because right now, a lot of communities, like where I live, we have single stream recycling. If anything gets in there, like somebody puts an empty bottle of bleach with a little bit of bleach in it, it contaminates the whole system. And also right now, glass in Massachusetts is not being recycled into bottles unless it is going through a bottle return system. So right now, most glass in Massachusetts is being ground up to make landfill cover or being put into asphalt. So we really need this expanded bottle bill. And it will, and also when it was passed, nobody was drinking water out of single-use plastic bottles. There wasn't iced tea in bottles. There's so many more bottled beverages now than there were years ago. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Michael Sales, do you have a question in stack?
I do, and I want to thank you so much for this inspiring and informative presentation. I'm wondering, and I know that your focus is local, but I'm wondering if you have any comments on the fact that the United Nations, the
Global Plastic Treaty.
Yeah. That's going to go into effect next year. It was almost exactly a year ago that this was passed by 175 nations. What's your impression of that, and what's your hope for it?
Well, I don't think the United States signed on to that Global Plastic Treaty, which is really abysmal. I think it's a great idea. I really support the Global Plastic Treaty. This is a global problem. I mean, when you start to see the images of plastic pollution in Asia and Africa, it is so upsetting and disturbing. I actually organized a protest in November against Coca-Cola in New York City because Coca-Cola was the sponsor of COP27. And we marched from the UN headquarters in Manhattan to Grand Central Station. We ended up in front of the New York City Public Library. But the main focus of that was the fact that, you know, the climate conference was being sponsored by the #1 plastic polluter. And then a lot of those delegates from COP went on to the Global Plastic Treaty Conference, which I think was in Brazil. It was somewhere in South America last fall. I don't actually know all that much about the Global Plastic Treaty, I will say that. But Beyond Plastics does not work just locally. We also support the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which is a
Absolutely.
national act. And Catherine Clark, who is my U.S. representative, is the #1 sponsor of the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, but it has not yet been announced this session. When it is announced, I will be there. I hope with her. I was with her a few weeks ago and I got onto her Instagram and newsletter. I was very happy because I had some of these posters with me, the Plastic Kills, and 3 members of my local group, the Beyond Plastics Greater Boston group, were there at a talk that she was giving on the Massachusetts Zero Waste Legislative Caucus. That was in Lexington on February 16th.
Just a couple.
I think I forgot to say the expanded bottle bill will raise the return deposit from a nickel to a dime. So I want to make sure that's clear too.
Absolutely. I just wanted to say, I put information about the UN Global Treaty in the chat. And also, we had representatives of Catherine Clark's office address us either at a chapter meeting or in one of our deep dives. I believe that was in 2021. Long before she became the whip for the Democratic caucus. Thank you so much.
She's great on plastic issues, and I've been in touch with her, one of her colleagues, her employees, I guess, Wade Blackman. So he's met with our group also, and we are ready if you want to join me when she makes her announcement and has her press conference. I hope it's going to be, you know, local, and we will go with all our signs and support.
Well, I think we'd very much like to know about that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So I make a lot of anti-plastic art and climate art in general. So I don't know if you can see this banner behind me that says "Stop the Tsunami of Plastic Pollution," but it's all made out of single-use plastic face masks I found in the streets of Watertown. And it also has a plastic glove, some straws, bottles, cup covers, etc. So anyway, what's the next question?
Thank you, Eileen. I think we'll take the 4 people that are raise their hands and then we'll stop because we need to go on with the rest of the meeting. And Eileen makes incredible art. I've seen it at many rallies. It's just amazing. So Marie Bartlett, question?
Yes, just quickly, I take back any plastic bags like bread bags or anything like that to the grocery store recycling. Are those plastic bags recycled?
I think that's a lot of greenwashing. And actually what I have seen, and I don't think they're doing it anymore, but China was taking, I mean, one of the big issues with recycling is China used to take a lot of our plastic trash and then they stopped, I think in 2017, maybe 2018. But I've seen images where they were melting down. This was I think in the movie Baggett, melting down plastic bags. It's extremely toxic and kids are like scraping off this molten plastic off of these rollers. I'd say use them to pick up pet feces, give them to your friends if you don't have a dog. I don't know. Otherwise, just put them in the trash. They're not getting recycled.
Thank you. Joel.
It's kind of a similar question. I live in a pretty progressive community, Brookline. I've tried to learn what plastics to put in the recycling. I'm not talking about the bags now, but you said 1s and 2s and sometimes 5s, but basically most people, no matter how well intended they are, don't know what to do. And for instance, I learned that you can't put, and this will be a question, you shouldn't put wax covered like ice cream containers and milk containers. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's not really
okay.
wax.
So people don't know this, and all kinds of things go in, or they're a little dirt. What is, even in a community like mine, what do you think is happening to all that plastic we're putting in the recycling bins? Is it just going to landfill or what?
Well, I think in Massachusetts, unfortunately, a lot of it gets incinerated. So I went to my MRF. My MRF is stands for Municipal Recycling Facility. I'm actually on the recycling committee in my town. And that was the number one thing I wanted to do, was to go to a recycling facility because I'd never been to one. So it's in Peabody, the one that we use in Watertown. And it's a pretty disturbing situation to see the people that have to, the people whose job it is to hang over these conveyor belts of plastic and toss out all the stuff that can't be recycled, and get rid of all the plastic bags that are going through. And most of these people are Black men. Okay. Is that and the dust and the microplastics that are going into the air from this are so to me, so concerning. And these people were working without any kind of face masks or any kind of protection. But number one plastic is being made into polar fleece, and there is actually in Massachusetts a market for the number 1 and 2 plastics. I don't know if there's much of a market for number 5, but all the other ones definitely should go into the trash. Does that
Thank you.
answer your question well enough?
One, a little follow-up is, so are they really able to stand there, a bunch of people, you know, and do that kind of sorting for real? Because if they miss 20%, then
Yeah,
what?
well, a lot of it is, you've probably heard black plastic can't be recycled because the black cannot be read by the scanner. There's an electronic scanner. So they're not sorting every single piece, but they're just sort of inspecting as it goes along for anything, for mostly mostly what I was saying, like plastic bags, but I was also seeing up in the upper regions of this amazing contraption, people having to pull certain plastics out of the system. Most of it is being scanned electronically, but the black plastic cannot be scanned at all. And also black plastic often has electronic components that have been recycled into it. So it's really toxic. It's worse than almost any other plastic. There's a thing on the Beyond Plastics website if you want to learn more about black plastic. So who's next?
Okay, we'll take Roger and then we'll take Roy, and I think we'll stop there because we need to move on in our agenda. Go ahead, Roger.
Thank you. Great presentation. Very helpful. I'm looking around my room here and I'm seeing virtually everything is made of rigid plastic that's reusable and does last a long time or forever. Are there risks in the production of rigid plastics that are similar, and how much do they contribute to climate change compared to the single-use plastics?
Well, yeah, rigid plastic is also being made by petrochemicals, right? So it's also being made by fossil fuels and toxic chemicals, and it does break down in your environment. So carpet, upholstery, all of that is putting microplastics, microfibers into the air in your home. I'm very concerned about the amount of plastic I'm seeing as construction materials in houses, plastic doors, plastic cabinets. My personal feeling is it's not good. I don't really know all the details, but it's definitely linked to climate change. It's all connected to
Produced
climate
the
change.
same way.
And
Yeah,
it's
with the same
all,
chemicals.
yeah, it's all produced the same way. It's all, all of it's an environmental justice issue. I mean, plastics actually encompasses everything you can think of that's an ecological or social justice issue.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Roy.
Yes, thank you, and fascinating presentation. My question is about what the end of life destiny is for plastics. The stuff that's just lying around as litter on top of the ground or on top of the ocean. You talked about leaching. I've heard that some of it will oxidize and turn into CO2. But could you just say what's the primary pathway to whatever the final state of plastic is? Is it just breaking down and winding up in the groundwater, or going up to the atmosphere, or what?
Well, it's all of that. So it turns, it gets, so there's microplastics and then there's nanoplastics. So it never totally disappears. It's not compostable. It's not biodegradable. So if it's in a landfill, it's going to be turning into probably leachate out of a landfill. If it's in the ocean is a huge problem. The oceans are getting warmer, partly because of the amount of plastic that's in them. I'm not quite sure why, but I think it has something to do with the breaking down of the plastics and maybe also reflection off of plastic particles in the ocean. Was there something else does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, final question, Rick Lent.
Yeah, you almost mentioned it, but I didn't hear a full statement. What do you think about plastic that claims to be compostable? I know it's only compostable in a high heat municipal facility, but is it worth it to try and convince some organization to switch?
I
from-
don't think so. It still often has petrochemicals in it, and and PFAS and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a lot of greenwashing, personally. So you should look at the Beyond Plastic website. They have something also about compostable plastics on there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Eileen. This so just reminds me again of the tobacco industry, all of the tactics that they use that the plastic industry is copying and using so well, as we know fossil fuel industry is doing. So let's give a big round of applause to Eileen Ryan, and show up at one of her rallies and you can see her incredible art. So thank you, Eileen. You're welcome to stick around if you want. Roger's going to lead us in a conversation about the bills that Elders Climate Action is sponsoring around plastic, or looking at anyway. We're taking a look at for plastics. So Roger.
Okay, I am going to share screen here. And we'll go back to the beginning if I can. There we go. Okay, so my objective here is just to kind of go through the legislation that we've taken a quick look at in the legislative team. We haven't really come to any conclusions yet about the priority for plastics legislation or reviewed it in depth, but I was very impressed with what's out there. I have no doubt that we're going to be endorsing this legislation, but where it sits in our priorities, we got a bunch of things on our radar this time around, and we only have a limited number of folks. We're always recruiting, and more people we have, the more we can do. So there are a number of things that are banned in a number of bills that have been filed this session, and that includes the most plastic food service items, and you can see the list there, including these loose plastic bottle caps, very specifically, kind of an important thing there, and the very bad black plastic that's in a lot of trays. There's also a ban on providing utensils with takeout unless people ask for them. So I guess that would take care of it in the interim when there's still some plastic out there, or even for the recyclables. You got to ask for them. You know how I often get this stuff in my takeout bag, but I never was asked one way or the other. So there's going to be potentially a ban on that if that legislation passes. And then there's ban on single-use grocery bags and takeout bags for packaging. And that potentially, if the single-use grocery bag, I guess, would take care of all of the towns in the Commonwealth for that, as opposed to waiting for that to happen town by town. And then it's most polystyrene also in food service items, all kinds of stuff, but also in coolers, beach toys, probably the rubber ducky that's not really rubber, but in some cases it's probably made of polystyrene, floats, and packing material. So getting rid of all that stuff would be fantastic. Even more, you mentioned the bottle bill for returning glass bottles, but for those small plastic bottles that contain those little nips of whiskey for the hotel shampoo and hair conditioner and all that stuff, all those small bottles would be banned. And the tampon applicators, very specifically, as a focus. Not sure why that's been singled out, but it's got a bill of its own. Plastic wet wipes, which I'm not that familiar with, but I guess some of them have plastic in them. And then most balloons that are filled with helium or a similar gas. I'm not sure why they limit it to gas, but there's probably a good reason for that. And then also the banning of toxic chemicals in plastic bottles or limitation of toxic chemicals in plastic bottles and other containers. So those are the very specific items that are addressed in these bills that we'll be showing you in a minute, but there are also some more general issues that are taken up in these bills. So one is a proposal for a commission to recommend a plastics producer responsibility plan. So there's not one that's out there in the legislation that I saw, but a plan to develop one and bring it back to the legislature. A plan to extend composting to all of Massachusetts, and a proposal for an annual report on all production and use of all packaging products in the state, to sort of track what's happening with both plastic and paper and even the recyclables, to sort of see where we're going with packaging. Recycling of child safety restraints, not sure what that's about, but it's a part of one of the bills. The creation of a fund to reduce the impact of some of these plastic bans on low-income residents. If there are any hardships that are caused by some of these plastic bans, that potentially this would be a fund that would take care of some of that. If folks with limited incomes have to purchase products that are more expensive, I'm not sure what the examples would be, but this would take care of that. Then there are also exceptions, as you might expect, in some cases for small businesses, obviously for emergencies, and sometimes for customer requests. Interesting, if a customer still requests plastic utensils, one part of one bill sort of said, well, they can get them. and not sure what that's about. Maybe they have allergies to the recyclable utensils. I have no clue. But those are the other kind of issues that are dealt with in these bills. And this is probably not totally comprehensive. I just went through these the other day. These are the actual bills themselves. One is this act to reduce single-use plastics from the environment that's being put forward by Rep. Chicolo and Senator Lewis. And a similar one, these two probably would be packaged into an omnibus bill because there's a lot of overlap, but there are some unique elements in each bill. And that's an act relative to the reduction of plastics from Rep. Phillips. And then we have 3 Senate bills that are very specific, one on plastic straws, one on these plastic tampon applicators, and one on plastic packaging waste. And that really actually focuses on plastic utensils. And those are all Senate bills filed by, well, and actually the second one does have a House component with Rep. Connor, but Senators Barrett, Roush, and Cream, all of whom are very good on environmental and climate issues as well. So that's kind of where we stand. We'll be taking a look at that, but I'm going to throw out a few questions that Tina is going to lead us through to have a little bit of a discussion about everything that we've learned today. And some of the questions we thought would be helpful to generate some discussion about, well, what are your take-home messages? What did you learn today that's important and relevant and may make a difference to you? Are you thinking of any behavior changes, contemplating things now that you've heard this story, or even before that, in terms of limiting the amount of plastic in your life? And then finally, what priorities should we be giving to the reduction in the use of single-use plastic? We have, like I said, sort of limited energy, and we've got a lot of climate mitigation issues that are on the front burner. Plastics could rise to the top depending on what our membership thinks and feels. And if anybody wants to step up and push the issue, there's always room for that as well. So Tina, I'm going to turn it over to you to facilitate discussion and any questions that people might have for me.
Thank you, Roger. So people got the bill numbers. If you can easily do it, Roger, to put them in the chat.
Okay.
People were asking, that would be great. If you could stop sharing screen, that would be great. Thank you very much. So we have about 10, 15 minutes at the most to have a discussion amongst us as Elder Climate Action Mass, who's interested in this most pressing issue around plastics. What are you doing in your own life? And should we start an affinity group? Are you interested enough that you'd step up and join the Ledge team and follow these bills, working on a working group at the Ledge team? So I see Pamela, you have your hand up. You ready to jump in?
Yes, I think it's really important, but then a whole bunch of things are really important. For the most important things, I would think the economic wedge arrow point argument is real important to emphasize, especially when we're talking to the legislatures, because the plastics industry and the fossil fuel industry does that all the time. You know, yes, we should we should do all these good things, but the cost is just too high right now. So we need to, and it isn't. In fact, it's cheaper for the entire system to do birth to death assignment of the costs for packaging and everything, including plastics, particularly like artificial turf. If you look at the actual economic comparisons between really good fields, artificial and non-artificial, the artificial are much more expensive. I think there are two things that are most important to be on the top of the list: plastics and decarbonizing and electrifying everything.
Thank you. Thank
Electrify
you.
everything. And because the utility companies are thinking that solar and so on are intermittent, and that's not true when it's combined.
Yes, Pamela, I'm going to stop you there because today we're just focusing on plastics. So we hear your vote is to talk about economic argument. Thank you, Lynn.
But also, how do we get the legislature won't do it? It's been going in year after year after year.
Yeah.
And the
it's-
leadership is bought by the plastics industry. How can we get them to even bring it up for a vote?
So come join the ledge team and let's talk about it. I'm going to let Lynn go next. Thank you, Pam.
I was gonna say, join my group. We're gonna be meeting with Melissa Hoffer soon. You can talk to her about it.
Great. Thank you, Eileen.
Great.
Go ahead,
thanks.
Lynn.
Well, I wanted to share a book that I think this group might be really interested in because it has to do with PFAS. It's a book called Countdown. And it, the author escapes me at the moment, but it's actually
Shauna Swan. I mentioned that in my presentation. It's an amazing book. She's an amazing scientist. I highly recommend.
Yeah, this is about the reduced fertility because of PFAS and is that the one?
Endocrine disruptors, phthalate.
Yes, endocrine disruption. Thank you. I missed that. I'm sorry. I must have blinked when you mentioned that. So I do urge people, it's a fascinating read and it explains a lot of some of the biological issues that we're seeing because of plastics interfering. And if you can't convince people for any other reason, you can convince them that your children are going to, really be impacted by this. And secondly, I think a lot about my own behavior in sort of saying, okay, I'm really going to just not do anything that will cause me to receive something that is in single-use plastic. And I had made that pledge, and then the pandemic hit. And then, of course, the pandemic was just horrible for our environment, and among other things. And I think it's a lot of it is obviously legislative is at that level, but being just more aware when we order things and we get packages and we get boxes, and then the things inside the boxes are wrapped in plastic. And I'm beginning to think I'm just going to start calling some of these companies that I order from and say, I won't receive anything that you have shipped in plastic. So I'm not going to buy anything unless you can tell me that this is not, everything's going to be compostable. So that's it. Thank you.
Not sure I mentioned this, but India does all paper packaging with Amazon, and Amazon could be doing that everywhere. So they don't need to be using all that plastic packaging. And so there's a petition you can sign also at Beyond Plastics if you want to.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Maria.
Hi. I would encourage us to do, if we can somehow in this all this legislation, do an omnibus bill, because then you're just spending all of your energy on all these little things, you know, it would be better if it could be an omnibus bill. I don't know. And then artificial turf is just huge as far as I'm concerned with all of the issues. So those would be my two suggestions. And I have been struggling with how to get, when I buy a lot of berries and they're always in these clamshell things. And I think I'm just going to have to take something with me, and then you take the container up to the checkout counter and dump, you know, let them scan the thing and then dump it into your container. I don't know what else to do. You know, there's no way around it.
All right, so
particularly.
you're correct. Clamshell plastic cannot be recycled. But Driscoll's, who is the biggest producer of berries in those
Yep.
clamshells, they are making cardboard containers and using them in Oregon and some other states on the West Coast. They can be doing it everywhere. So that's another campaign I would love to be part of. I'm sure you could generate interest in that. Is
Hi,
target-
Sharon. I had Dr. Alkira do his office
Hey,
do a hearing
Ed-
test
Ed
on me. I'd
Wall.
like to come in
Ed.
and be fitted for new
Ed.
hearing
Ed.
aids. And I have they sent me a sheet of how to do that. And this number was on it, so I'm calling.
That was funny.
Did that. Thank you very much. Wayne Wyatt, you're next.
Yeah, hi. I had 2 points to make. One, I've been mostly concentrating at the institutional level, as some of you know, at Berklee College of Music, and we've had tremendous success. We have a very big sustainability coalition, and the cafeteria has been fantastic. It's Aramark, and they've removed all plastic bottles of water. You can only get water from a dispenser. We've replaced a lot of and we have all sorts of water refill stations around the college, and we're having an Earth Day, and we do a lot of education. So my point there is, if anyone works in a kind of institutional environment, a very good place to start is there. And the other thing is, I think what I see most is we really need to educate the young people, and I think it needs to start in high school. Should start earlier, but at least in high school, again, with the cafeterias eliminating the plastic bottles and more of the kind of information that Eileen just has presented, being presented to them. We do it at Berklee. We have a lot of projects with films and talks, and we're going to devote a whole week to that also. But I think the young people need, because I see them standing outside CVS with their plastic bottles.
Thank you, Wayne. Yeah. Michael, oh, go ahead, Eileen. Did you want to respond?
I hope you don't mind me. I keep jumping in, but the high schools are paid to have the plastic water bottles in those dispensers. And that is one of the reasons why they won't get rid of them. It's a huge problem, but we actually worked when we were doing our plastic bag campaign in Watertown. We worked to make sure that they were refill stations in our high school, and we have them in the town hall and other places now. But Beyond Plastics also has a campaign to work with colleges and schools to get the vending machines not to have beverages in plastic bottles, but to go to cans instead.
Great.
So it sounds like that should be a statewide campaign with all the schools in the public schools in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
That's a great
so-
idea.
Michael Sales, you're next.
Thanks. So as we've been talking, it struck me that one of the things that we might do as Elders Climate Action is to have something coming out of the Ledge Committee or somewhere that would state we are 1,000 members. We have 3,000 children. We have 10,000 grandchildren, whatever the number is, and show our pictures. And to have it ready to go to send to all these places like Costco. I shop at Costco. The amount of packaging that is unrecyclable from Costco is just disgusting, etc. And to do something that shows our force as an organization. Of course, we could be in coalition with operations like Beyond Plastic and other allies in this cause. But to put in front of these executives, like I've written Costco a couple of times. I'll stop momentarily. But I've written Costco, the head of investor relations at Costco, the head of operations, never gotten a response of any sort. But to put something in front of them that says, particularly here in Massachusetts, that we are active parents and grandparents that stand up for 5, 10, whatever thousand number of people, and try to really communicate to everybody that's on our mailing list that, this is something that's easy for you to do, and it's the kind of thing that Elders Climate Action stands for.
So we'll take the lead on that, Michael. Thank you so much. Rick Lent.
So I've got a public event coming up in 6 months. I'm trying to figure out how to replace all the bad plastic cups in a food truck event serving 1,000 people. I'm currently looking at a company that I put in the chat called Vegware. And presumably they're designing their cups to be more ecologically sound. They mention using PLA. I don't know that compound. I'm very interested in any experience with that.
Okay, thank you, Rick. If somebody knows, put it in the chat. It's 1:30. We're going to stick to our agenda. Thanks everybody for your suggestions. And again, if you have an idea, if you'd like to write to either myself or Roger, we'll put our names in the chat. If you're interested in working on the plastics ledge bills, we'll be glad to take you up at the ledge team, or if you want to start a working group around it. So thank you again, Eileen. We're going to switch topics. You're welcome to stay again because you're probably involved with this as well. But the bank accountability National Day of Action at 3/21/23. I love that number. And so Seth will lead us on that. So Seth Evans.
Thanks, everyone. You've probably heard a little bit about this if you've been reading our newsletters and action alerts, but I want to remind you that this is next Tuesday. It's called the Banking in Our Future campaign, and the day of action is Tuesday, 3/21/23, which is nice and palindromic in case you didn't notice. Before we get started, I just wanted to launch a poll and ask for your cooperation in answering a few very quick yes or no questions, and then I'll give you some more information. So here's the poll. It's no time limit, but if you could answer these, and we can just see. Go for about 10 more seconds.
What's CITA? CITA?
Oh, Citi. I'm sorry. It should have been Citibank.
Yeah, it's that's a second typo.
Wayne, I wish you were around when we drew up these things.
But it's Citi. It's not Citizens.
No, it's Citi. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll here. Quick. I'm going to share the results so you can see which you're.
Wow, a lot of people with Thanks.
Now, I'm not actually seeing the results.
Is everybody able to see the results? Thumbs up? Yep.
Okay. For some reason, I'm not. So Tina, maybe you could summarize.
Well, they've now disappeared, but we had a lot of people who are with one of those banks. And I'm not sure. Somebody's screen sharing here. It said Maria Bartlett was screen sharing. I don't know how that's possible. Okay, thanks for taking that down. So I don't remember exactly. We had a lot of people with the banks and about 49% of people considering switching.
Yeah, well, that's great. There's a day that we're trying to coordinate. This is a nationwide campaign, and the idea is to put maximum pressure on the banks to change their behavior, but also, if they're not willing to give them some bad PR, which is probably the only way to get them to switch. And so the idea was to get people's actions focused on this one day, 3-2-1-2-3, so that we can have maximum impact, both in terms of a direct message to the bank and through the media. So there are events planned around the country, and there are many planned around Massachusetts, and these are organized primarily by Third Act, but with ECA being another group that's been part of the coalition. 350 Mass has been very active within Massachusetts as well. And Third Act, as you know, is a group that was launched by Bill McKibben a little over a year ago. And this campaign was something that was imagined a little over a year ago, but it's finally coming to fruition with this day of action. The premise, obviously, is that the banks are a huge element of the climate crisis, and that we want to try to do something about it, and that we can do something about it. And this is a continuation of a broad national and international movement, really, to try to stop the money pipeline. It's the name of another campaign that's been going on for several years. Anyway, to stop new gas infrastructure and oil infrastructure projects, and to transform the financial system to one that's more supportive of clean energy, healthy communities, etc. So the main event that we hope people will participate in, if they're able, is next Tuesday at Downtown Crossing. We're going to start at Citibank at 425 Washington Street, and that's going to be at noon. And we're going to try to gather there a little bit before noon. I'm going to put some links into the chat in a moment about how, with maps about that action, as well as others across the state. There are actions in Newton and Lexington. There's a couple of places in Lexington, in Bedford, in Worcester, and in Northampton as well. And, this is not just for people who are able to show up at one of these actions. It's not just for people who are absolutely ready or who have already made a switch to another bank or another credit card company, because this is a decision that really is a difficult one, and it requires a lot of thought, a lot of investigation. And I don't want to pretend to be the person that can tell you how to do that. But there are ways, and there are resources, and I'm happy to share those resources with people if they choose to do more investigation about it. The other thing that you can do is that you can make a pledge to switch your bank or credit card, and take some time, which is good advice anyway, to do that research and investigate how you're going to do that. So a lot of us don't bank at those banks, but we might have a credit card that is issued through one of those banks, or they may be the backup institution. So if you do decide that you're going to participate in one of these actions, we hope you show up wearing your green ECA t-shirt. We hope that you will also have the time to make a sign. If you don't make a sign, we will probably enlist you to hand out leaflets or to do other things these actions are going to be playful. There's going to be some theatrics. There's going to be a bad banker who we're going to boo off the stage, and others will be there with giant scissors cutting up cards. And this be a great way for people to show their support, and also to attract media attention, which is one of the ways that this action can be effective. So I'm going to put a few chats in a few links in the chat for signs, sign ideas. Some of the signs the link for the signs will allow you to print out certain large size signs if you have the large paper and the capability in your printer. Others links will give you the addresses and times and meeting places for the other actions around the state. And if there's anybody that is planning to go and wants to let me know by either dropping me a little note in the chat or by sending me an email, I'd be delighted to talk to you and perhaps we can coordinate. Any questions about that?
How many people here have thinking about going to Boston? Great. How many people here are attending another rally in Lexington or Bedford? Great. Newton. Terrific. Great. So I put Seth's email in the chat. Again, if you want to make a sign, you're welcome to make your own sign, of course. There'll be some suggestions there for some short phrases that you can use on your sign, or you can, as Seth said, you can print out on your printer something that's recommended by Third Act and put it on a poster and bring it to one of the rallies on 3/21/23. Any questions about that activity on 3/21/23?
I know that we've had some dialogue in between members of ECA about some of the scary things that are going on in the banking world right now, and how that might lead to reluctance of people to make a switch from a very large bank, which presumably is more stable and not going to be allowed to fail, to a smaller bank. I don't know. Obviously, nobody knows for sure whether that is going to be an issue, but I just want to encourage you to really take the time and investigate this. You might want to wait until some of this mini bank crisis with the Silicon Valley Bank and a couple of others plays out, but it doesn't seem like the Silicon Valley Bank issue is one that will extend to other smaller or mid-sized banks, that unless they had lots and lots of deposits of venture capital money a couple of years ago, which seemed to be the issue that got Citibank into trouble. That got Silicon Valley Bank into trouble, excuse me. Actually, I'm seeing that these are not linked. The rally sites, they are not linked. If you are interested in information about any of those sites, let me know. I will chase down those.
So I think we're come to the end of our time. Michael Sales, you have your hand up.
I do. Seth, you made a statement about just now about the protection that people can expect from using regional banks, that the problems with SVC and Signature do not extend to other regional banks. Yet there's been a huge run on regional banks. Could you elaborate a little bit on why you are of the view that you just expressed, if I heard it correctly?
Well, this situation with SVB was very particular to its the nature of its deposits and the way that they had invested that money in long-term bonds. So they had lots and lots of cash that was the result of financing mostly high-tech companies. A lot of it was, billions of dollars that were invested by venture capital in these companies. And so that's a very particular situation. But any deposit up to $250,000 is protected by the FDIC. Most of us are not going to be, depositing large amounts of cash beyond that. So I wouldn't worry if you're below that threshold. A lot of the depositors at savings at Silicon Valley Bank are very large companies, and they're going to be facing some problems unless this bailout works as hoped.
So, Irina, you have a question about Lexington. The Lexington Climate Action Network is sponsoring the Lexington Rally. Seth just sent out an email to all the Google emails, so you should be able to get that information from that email, and you can sign up there or get the information from them. I believe on that web page. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yeah. Check your email. There's an action alert that went out about this today.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of our time. We'll give you back 15 minutes to your day. It stopped snowing a little bit here in Hudson, so maybe it's all going to end a little bit earlier than they predicted, which would be a very nice typical March snowstorm. But we live in New England. It's never over until it's over in May. Some of us can remember that May Day in 1990, whenever that was, when it snowed on May 10th or something like that. So snowed a foot, and then the sun came out and it was all gone the next day. So come to the actions on Tuesday. Team, doing your local work. We appreciate all of your attending today. Thank you so much.